Welcome. In this video we explain the meaning of phased activities and reveal their massive and often overlooked implications. Overlooked not only by a person carrying out a listed activity, but also environmental assessment practitioners tasked with authorizing these activities. Welcome. My name is Sean McGregor of Ecoleges Environmental Consultants based in Mpumalanga, South Africa. And we're on a mission to empower all South Africans to protect their environment through the correct interpretation and application of our environmental legislation. So if you want to learn how our environmental law applies to you and avoid unnecessary and costly mistakes, or if you want to increase your knowledge and skills to reduce your reliance on external consultants, then you'll want to subscribe to this channel. Don't forget to click on the bell notification icon so that you can be notified the moment we upload a new video. And if you can think of anyone else who can benefit from these videos, please help us spread the message by liking them. We really appreciate the support and thank you. So let's get started. We continue with the same series, most common recurring non-compliances, and the title of this video is The Hidden Trap of Phased Activities. So what is a phased activity? A phased activity means an activity that is developed in phases over time on the same or adjacent properties to create a single or linked entity. But it excludes an activity where an environmental authorization has been obtained in terms of NEMA, the National Environmental Management Act, or ECA, the Environmental Conservation Act. What the latter basically means is once an activity has been authorized, the scorecard of accumulated phases, whether they be volume, surface area, or length, reverts back to zero. Let me give you an example using listed activity 27 of listing notice 1, which reads, the clearance of an area of 1 hectare or more, but less than 20 hectares of indigenous vegetation. And let's say, for example, I cleared 5,000 square meters last year. I would not have required an environmental authorization because it fell below the prescribed threshold of 1 hectare or 10,000 square meters. Then, let's say I clear another 2,500 square meters this year. Again, it falls below the threshold. I don't need an environmental authorization. Even if it is read together with the phased activity, the accumulated area that has been cleared is 7,500 square meters, which again falls below 1 hectare, the prescribed threshold. But if I want to clear another 2,500 square meters or more next year, then the combined phases reaches or exceeds the prescribed threshold in activity 27 of listing notice 1, in which case I will need to obtain an environmental authorization before proceeding with the third phase of clearance next year. However, once I've obtained that environmental authorization, my scorecard of accumulated clearance activities or phases reverts back to zero. I hope that made sense. Now there are two phased activities. Listed activity 67 of listing notice 1 and listed activity 26 of listing notice 3. They're actually the last activities listed in those notices. Listed activity 67 of listing notice 1 includes 8 references to activities listed in listing notice 2. So although listing notice 2 doesn't in its own right contain a phased activity, some of its listed activities do need to be read in conjunction with the phased activity listed in listing notice 1. Have you got it? Okay. Then listed activity 67 of listing notice 1 and listed activity 26 of listing notice 3 do not apply to all activities listed in those notices. In other words, some of the listed activities are specifically excluded from the scope of those two phased activities. So then, what is the scope of these two listed activities? They include all applicable listed activities that commenced on or after the 8th of December 2014. That is when our latest set of EIA regulations came into effect. Or similarly listed activities that commenced on or after the effective date of previous NEMA notices. Now, notice I refer to previous NEMA notices. That has two very important implications. Firstly, similarly listed activities under ECA are excluded, meaning they cannot contribute to the reckoning of phased activities over time. And secondly, a phased activity can only go as far back as the 3rd of July 2006. That's when ECA was repealed by the first Nema Notice. Before I wrap this up, I just want to explain what I mean by similarly listed activities and how they apply to the listed phased activities. A similarly listed activity is an activity that was listed in a previous ECA or Nema notice, and it is still listed in the current notices that is today, either wholly or partially. The newly listed activity can be worded differently and include different thresholds. In fact, in many cases, only a portion of the original listed activity is still applicable under the current legislation. A phased activity, which includes such activities where any phase of an activity was below a threshold, but where the combined phases will exceed the prescribed threshold, doesn't only apply to the time frame of an existing notice and activity when that notice came into effect, but it also extends as far back into historical notices as one can link similarly listed activities that a person undertook. Perhaps it's best explained with an example, and I'll use the clearance activity again. Let's say you've purchased a farm and it's all virgin veldt. You want to start cultivating crops, and so you commence with your clearing, and that is now today, post 8th of December 2014. Your first clearance activity will be phase 1, and that's when you need to start tallying the area that you clear and measuring it against the prescribed threshold, depending on the clearance activity. Let me not get into too many details. Alternatively, let's say it's a family farm, you've inherited it from your father, and your father started clearing quite a few years ago, before 2014. The first phase of the clearance activity would have taken place under a similarly listed activity and under a previous notice quite a few years ago. Now I am going to read the Nema notices to you because I don't want to memorize them, okay? And it is important to know which Nema notice occurred, because you'll need to go back in time and figure out which regulations applied at the time of a particular phased activity, and so too then which thresholds applied. Okay, so the first Nema notice was published in 2006. They called it 2006 regulations. It included listing notice 1 and listing notice 2. They commenced on the 3rd of July 2006 and ended on the 1st of August 2010. They were replaced by the 2010 regulations, which included listing notice 1, 2 and 3. Listing notice 3 now includes the identified geographical areas, and that commenced on the 2nd of August 2010 until the 7th of December 2014. That was replaced by the existing 2014 regulations, which also includes listing notice 1, 2 and 3. That commenced on the 8th of December 2014 until the 6th of April 2017. That was replaced by the amended 2014 EIA regs, also listing notice 1, 2 and 3, from the 7th of April 2017 until today, which is 2021 February, probably 27th. Okay, now I'm going to include a link to the similar listings document published in 2015, as well as another very interesting document which outlines the timeframes and listed activities in the previous ECA and Nema regulations in the description below. I want to conclude our video by making 3 suggestions that stem out of our interpretation of the listed phased activities. A person, and most especially an environmental assessment practitioner, should, as a matter of compulsory protocol, determine whether a listed activity needs to be read and considered together with one of the listed phased activities. Then a person needs to track all the phases of any particular activity or project to determine whether any future phase or when a future phase will trigger a prescribed threshold, therefore or thereby requiring an application for environmental authorization. And it's probably worth noting that you don't need to get environmental authorization at the onset of phase 1 as long as it's below the threshold. You'll only need to get environmental authorization before commencing with that phase which exceeds the prescribed threshold. And that's it. I hope this was helpful, and thank you for watching. If you have joined the MP and Corsi tiers of our membership program, then you will receive an additional video. We actually apply our interpretation of the phased activities to the clearance of vegetation activities, but in a lot more detail, and then give some advice at the end on what your options are if you do discover or happen to find out that you've inherited an unlawful activity by virtue of having exceeded the threshold in a historical phase. If you haven't joined our membership program yet, then check it out on Patreon. Otherwise, if you're looking for a consultant to help you with a once-off project, you're welcome to visit our website. And I do recommend, look at our previous video. We covered alien invasive plant species, horrible stuff. The next video, also quite cool. We try and protect you from being burnt. We actually look at the legislation governing burning. And yeah, subscribe. Don't forget to click on the bell notification icon. If you do like the video, or you know someone who can benefit, support us, help spread the message by liking it. We sincerely appreciate it. Thank you so much. Keep strong, and God bless.